century AD, persecution is still rare. After all, the Roman default position is simply, does it break the law?
And to top it all, where the emperor is taking action against people, say for meeting in private, it has nothing to do with the fact they are Christians. He doesn't want anyone to. It is beginning to look more and more like the Christians have over-exaggerated their persecution. At every turn, I seem to be discovering that, at least in the time of Trajan, not only is persecution not policy, but there is even legislation against it. But legislation can't always change individual opinion. Some of them were very strong indeed, and this is going to turn up the heat. Around the 180s AD, a writer called Celsus describes what some Romans believe Christians are getting up to behind closed doors. It still makes for a salacious read. Here's a few things that were said.
What minister of evil demons can do such things? By means of what incantations and magic? But it is consistent with the existence of magic and source hands of certain presbyters belonging to our faith, barbarous books containing the names and marvelous doings of demons, but all that was calculated to injure human beings. Would indeed that all that is said by Celsus to devour the flesh of infants and give themselves without restraint to sexual intercourse with their women. In the 70 years since the Emperor Trajan told Pliny that Christians should not be hunted out, we have now come to a stage where a writer insists that they devour the flesh of infants and give themselves without restraint to sexual intercourse with their women. Now, if Celsus is representative of even some Romans, then attitudes to Christians have changed dramatically. Outrageous as these accusations may have been, it is possible to understand why the Romans might actually have believed them.
They may hear that Christians are calling each other brothers and sisters and exchanging the kiss of peace. They may hear that they are eating the body and blood of their God. Well, they may be cannibals. That this is why they're meeting in secret and why they're meeting at night.
But the way Christians practice the rites of their religion is going to be a much deeper problem for Romans. One that cuts to the very core of what it is to be Roman itself. Religion for the Romans is as much about what you do as what you believe. In particular, public sacrifice and joining in with the social system, it is a way of ordered life. And they call it religio. Now, it has been said that being Roman is not a nationality, but a vocation, a state of being. Romans are conformists, and nowhere more so than in their religio. But the Christians appear to be doing something else. They are indulging in something the Romans call superstitio.
Superstitio to the Romans is the idea of going totally over the top. It's their way of labeling people who are too obsessive and get too carried away with their religious beliefs and practices. And this is absolutely how they categorize the Christians.
Religio involves getting on with public religious and social conventions that keep the empire going and achieve cultural uniformity. It's almost like Christianity, to Romanize, is doing the opposite of what a religion should do.
They are bizarre, they don't deserve to be gods, and that is a way of impugning the whole structure of Roman law and Roman authority.
Traditionally, and in my opinion quite reasonably, the Romans don't like their whole way of life being attacked.
This might have been less of a problem for the Romans if the Christians weren't also trying to convert non-believers to their cause.
Christianity is, from the beginning, a missionary, evangelical movement. Its ambition is to go out into the world and convert every nation. baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit.
They're also converting people away from families, so that you see families being split up and torn apart.
And we can easily see how that might antagonize anyone. So, I've got won't sacrifice, which is messing with the system. Meet in secret, which is potentially seditious. Have strange practices which are easily confused as perverted. Splitting up families and aggressive missionary behavior. When you add it all up, for the Romans, Christianity is a pretty dangerous type of religion. So we've got the beginnings of a serious us versus them divide. But in spite of that, we still, for the first 150 years or so of Christianity, don't get any records of state persecution.
But in 165 AD, the Roman world is rocked by something that has nothing to do with the beliefs and attitudes of its people.
Today, some Christian groups posit that the recent economic crisis has driven people to religion. Now, if this is true, then perhaps a cataclysmic event such as the plague, which turned the whole social fabric of the empire on its head, might have had the same result back then.
Some scholars argue that Christianity, with its associations of healing, also becomes more and more popular during the years of the plague.
People were in deep need of social service networks, and it seems that earliest Christian communities were fairly effective at supplying social service networks. It may have been largely the poor giving to the poor in moments of need, but Christians seem to have done this fairly well.
So during the plague years, Christianity seems likely to be spreading and growing.
We're beginning to see Christians appearing in places where the elite are taking notice. We begin to see Roman citizens becoming Christians. This means that Christianity is going to be taken seriously in a different kind of way.
Anyone, irrespective of race, class, or status, can become a Christian. And as their numbers grow, they become a more visible group. Christians as opposed to non-Christians, further exacerbating a culture of them and us, and along the way, making them an easy target. And I'm told there's some evidence in the French city of Lyon of exactly that happening.
Towards the end of the 2nd century, the Roman mob mounts a violent attack on the Christian community in Lyon in southern France. The mob cajoles the Roman authorities into rounding up possibly hundreds of Christians, and what follows is one of the bloodiest persecutions of the century. The names inscribed here in the crypt of the Basilica Saint-Martin in the city are those who were martyred.
The setting for this monument leaves the casual visitor under no illusion that these people died for their faith. But did they? I want to know whether this was really what happened, or just an overlaid interpretation in later Christian histories.
In the situation in Lyon, the Christians seem to be what we would call immigrants. You know, people who didn't belong. So there's a certain amount of tension there between the locals and the new folks, so to speak.
Some scholars believe that these immigrants were as likely attacked for racial and economic reasons as religious ones. But whether or not these other factors played a part, the most common link between those who suffered and died was that they were Christian. And in response, the people turned to their community leaders, the clergy. And the man in charge in Lyon was a bishop named Irenaeus.
This is what remains of Irenaeus' tomb. Around 1800 years ago, he is a prominent figure in the leadership of a small Christian community here in Lyon.
His people are searching for answers to why they suffered such a massacre.
He wants to see a sense of unity of the church behind the martyrs, to understand that their deaths have meaning.
He puts a positive spin on the suffering, giving it a sense of purpose.
And he wanted them to connect themselves with groups all over the world. It's rather, as in the American Revolution,
Out to give his community something to bind them together and reassure them that they are part of something bigger. And he's going to do this with simple pen and paper. In the beginning, there were no Christian writings, only oral traditions. Of course, eventually, this oral tradition gets written down, but not in any form resembling a modern Bible. Instead, there seems to have been a collection of writings that was much, much larger.
we now know there were many other Gospels that had not survived physically. So what we actually have in the four Gospels of the New Testament is a small and carefully chosen selection of what Christian leaders wanted Christians to know.
The stories and teachings of Jesus and those who followed him are written down in various ways and by many people.
The Gospel of Thomas,
The letter of Galatians,
the Gospel of Philip,
Galatians 2,
The Gospel of Judas,
the shepherd of Hermas, which most Christians probably haven't heard about,
Gospel of Truth,
the Gospel of Mary Magdalene,
and the Gospel of the Egyptians,
the epistle of Barnabas.
Clement and Ignatius and Polycarp.
I think we all get the idea. And so, in the 2nd century, the Bible, in the sense that we understand it today, did not exist. In fact, the earliest surviving complete copy we have is from about 200 years later. But now, the concept of this book does begin to appear. Irenaeus takes the approach that, okay, we've got a lot of texts, but here are the key ones. Let's make those special. He is designing the core set of scriptures for Christians that will give form to Christianity at home and to believers everywhere, so that wherever they are from, they belong to a group with a set of codes to live by. Of course, I can see what's coming. As the list of approved texts gets refined, they start to coalesce into what will become the all-time best-selling book in history, the Bible. Back in the time of Irenaeus, they didn't know how successful it would become. But what they did hope was that this compilation would bind a new and fragile community with a sense of common identity. I'm getting a very clear picture now. Christians are producing a manifesto or a banner to rally around and give weight to a cause, something they are willing to die for. We've come a long way from the first Easter.
At the state level in the early 2nd century, we have the Roman Emperor Trajan telling his governor Pliny not to hunt down Christians. But at the micro level in the later 2nd century, we have Romans like Celsus creating these extraordinary views of what Christians are up to. A real sense of a growing separation between us and them. This separation leads in local cases to acts of violence, which in Irenaeus' case